There are people who are living inside bridges, tunnels, and forgotten structures. In 2019, a team of BBC journalists were reporting on the homelessness crisis in Los Angeles, and what they found shocked them. Tucked inside this massive railway bridge were people living, sleeping, and surviving. They decided to go inside to meet Amy. Amy wasn't just homeless, she was living inside the bridge with her dog. She chose to live inside this bridge because it felt safer. Only one way in, one way out. Dry during rain, cool in heat. Hidden, and of course, rent-free. As terrible as that sound, Amy wasn't alone. There were dozens of others living inside the same bridge. And it's not just this bridge, but many other bridges, not only in the US, but around the world. As someone who has inspected and been inside many bridges in my career, I can tell you, bridges make surprisingly decent shelters, but also really dangerous ones. So should you live inside one if you have nowhere else to go? Let's find out. Yes, some bridges are actually hollow. Not all, but many modern ones are designed that way. We call them box girder bridges. They are hollow because engineers have realized that the center of mass or the centroid of a bridge section contribute little to nothing to the stiffness of the bridge. In other words, the middle section of the bridge doesn't do much when it comes to resisting loads. Instead, it's the top and bottom flanges and the webs that do the heavy lifting. They handle all the forces like swinging, bending from heavy trucks, torsion from uneven loads or earthquakes. So engineers realized something: if the middle isn't doing much, why not hollow it out? The hollow design makes bridges lighter, cheaper, easier to build in sections, and much more resistant to complex forces. I actually made an entire video on this. Feel free to check it out after this video. But here is the twist. The middle part isn't just empty space, it's functional. It protects some key bridge components like its pre-stressing cables and anchors, which what gives concrete bridges their strength. The hollow section is also an inspection corridor for engineers to inspect and to keep up the bridge with the ever-increasing traffic loads. So its basic function is quite different from what these bridges are being used for, and that's where the problem begins. As someone who has been inside many bridges in my engineering career, let me just say, these spaces are not designed for humans to live in. First off, space is tight. The height inside these hollow sections is optimized for the structure, not for people. On large bridges, sure, you might be able to walk without hitting your head, even if you are 6 feet tall like me. But with the majority of bridges, especially on older or smaller railway bridges, you could be crawling, literally on your hands and knees. And it's dark, cramped, and full of dust, and it can be choking them out of dust. And then there is the oxygen problem. Most box girder bridges have limited openings and no airflow, which classifies them as a confined space. A confined space is an enclosed or partially enclosed space that has limited ventilation and a limited supply of fresh oxygen, which makes it unfit for human occupancy. Inside these spaces, oxygen can sometimes be displaced by other gases, which can be toxic. And when that happens, you can experience dizziness, confusion, and in extreme cases, brain damage. That's why when professionals go into these bridges, they often bring gas monitors or even full-on breathing apparatus, especially for older bridges with no proper ventilation. So when someone decides to make a bridge their home, it's really not a good idea. And we are not done listing these risks. These bridges are loud. The noises from the traffic above are high and amplified inside, bouncing around like a speaker. And yes, bridges move, they flex and bounce when vehicles pass. Long-span bridges can sway in the wind, and if you get motion sick easily, you're going to have a bad time. They are also dark, echoey, and filled with tripping hazards. You will need a flashlight just to see where you're going. You could also fall from height, since many bridge hatches are actually high to prevent easy access. So you might need an elevated working platform, for example, to access them, not some shady stack of chairs and tables. Accessing them without the right gear is basically asking for a broken leg. So yeah, living inside a bridge, not exactly a prime real estate. So if living inside is that dangerous, why do people still take that risk? The answer is the same reason some people choose to live inside an abandoned tunnel or under freeway overpasses. It's shelter. And I want to be clear, I am not an expert on homelessness. But what I do understand is this: being homeless isn't about finding an ideal space to live. It's about surviving. Homeless shelters can be overcrowded, unsafe, or come with strict rules that not everyone can follow. But a bridge offers solitude, protection from rain and cold, and maybe most importantly, something most of us take for granted, a sense of control over your own space. That's why some people choose to live under or even inside these bridges, because even though it's risky, it feels like the lesser evil. Homelessness is a global issue, and the reasons behind it are complex. Could be mental illness, job loss, addiction, or family breakdown, but at the core of it all, it almost always ties to poverty and lack of affordable housing. That's what pushes people to the street and makes places like bridges not homes but last resorts. From a city perspective, having people live inside or under a bridge isn't just a safety concern for them, it's a risk to the entire structure. Because here is the thing about bridges: when they fail, they do not give warnings, they fail suddenly. And the biggest risk to bridges is fire, because they are not fireproof. In 2017, part of Atlanta's Interstate 85 bridge collapsed after a fire broke out underneath it. The cause? A group allegedly started a fire under the viaduct. But what made it catastrophic was the flammable materials being stored by the Department of Transportation under the bridge. The more flammable materials you have inside or under a bridge, the higher the risk of fire, and the higher the chances of a bridge collapse. This includes setting up a kitchen, burning candles, dumping rubbish, and storing belongings inside or under. In 2023 in Jefferson County, Colorado, 6 people were found living inside the I-70 flyover. Authorities discovered piles of rubbish and even a kitchen, which could easily turn into fire hazard. But that's not the only risk. Inside both girder bridges, you'll often find a critical infrastructure, like pre-stressing anchor systems, telecom cables, and sometimes gas lines. Yes, gas lines, since bridges are a perfect way to run these services to cross a tricky terrain like rivers. Bridges can be tightly packed inside with services and not designed for human traffic. If someone damages a post-tension duct, anchor cable, or just exposes steel to moisture by drilling, they could weaken the bridge without even realizing it. And that puts everyone at risk, not just the person living inside. And if you do not know what post-tensioning is, check my video on this topic here. So from the perspective of authorities, it's not just about trespassing or inconvenience, it's about preventing disasters. Because when a bridge collapses, it's not just tragic, it's deadly. It causes months of traffic disruption, millions in economic losses, and worst of all, can cost lives. So what can authorities actually do about this? In theory, more can be done to secure bridges, like increasing the number of routine inspections or reinforcing access points like hatches and gates. And to be fair, many bridges are well secured and quite difficult to get inside. But that doesn't stop people from trying to break in, especially when it comes to critical infrastructure or landmark bridges. These are often targets for vandalism or even terrorist threats. That's why bridges like the Golden Gate, for example, are monitored 24/7 with CCTV and have fencing, motion sensors, and patrols. You'll also find suicide barriers and restricted zones to prevent unauthorized access. And that's not a box girder bridge, it's a well-known landmark. And here is the challenge: you can't lock up every bridge in the world. Just in the US, for example, there are over 600,000 bridges. Many of them you can live under, and around 50,000 of them are box girder bridges. Which, yes, you can technically go inside them. Add to that complex urban intersections with overlapping roadways or rail lines, and suddenly it's almost impossible to secure every bridge perfectly. And here is the thing: the real fix isn't locking every hatch or sealing every bridge, it's fixing housing and fixing support systems. All the solutions we talked about, those just treat the symptoms but not the root cause, because it's a human. Now I have to say again, I am not an expert on homelessness, but from what I have seen and read, the answers probably look like more shelters, more addiction services, more mental health support, more affordable housing. People fall into homelessness for all kinds of reasons: poverty, mental illness, addiction, family breakdown, the rising cost of just staying alive. And once someone ends up on the streets, it's really hard to climb back out. Studies show addiction is both a cause and a result of homelessness. And in countries like Canada, nearly 40% of people in need say job training is too expensive. Now imagine how impossible that feels when you don't even have a bed. So what's the real solution? I don't know, governments can maybe fund long-term housing and support, charities can help fill the gaps because at the core of it all, it's empathy. No one chooses to live inside a bridge because it's fun, they do it because it feels safer than the alternatives. Amy's story is just one of thousands, and when someone ends up sleeping inside a hollow bridge, it's not a crazy choice, it's a desperate one. So technically yes, you can live inside a bridge, but no one should have to. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, hit like and subscribe and let me know in the comments what surprised you the most. And I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.